Hungarian Folk Tales. The Water Fairy. Once upon a time, in a land far, far away, there lived a miller, and the miller had a wife. They had a fine big mill, and they earned their keep and passed their days. There was just one thing that caused them grief, and that was they had no child. And they grew poorer and poorer every day until they had nothing at all. The poor man lamented night and day that a curse had been laid upon them. Off he went one evening and sat by the mill pond. There he wept. All at once he heard a voice. "Listen, poor man, I'll help you in your troubles. I'll make you richer by far than ever before. All you have to do is give me the living creature that you have not got at home." So the poor man thought to himself, "What is it that I haven't got at home? Perhaps a dog? Perhaps a cat? What could it be? Right you are, I agree." The poor man cheered up and set off for home. He was still on his way when his servant came running towards him. "Quickly, Master Miller, the mistress has just given birth to a fine, healthy boy." Well now, the miller ran all the way back to the mill pond. Come here, you evil spirit, you have taken my child." But no one appeared. Home he went and told what had happened. They threw their arms around each other and wept and wept. What was going to become of their child? When would that voice take him away, raise the boy as the light of their lives? They never ever let him near the mill pond. And when he grew older, they told him that he was not to go there because the water fairy would carry him away. And the boy never went there. He avoided the place altogether. Now they became wealthier than anyone in the village before or since. Where they laid down a florin, the next day there were two. Time and tide went by, and they sent their son to a master woodman so that he would be a forester. So taken was the master with the lad, so quick and clever he was, that the master gave him his own daughter in marriage. The young man went all through the forest hunting. One day, he saw a fine stag. He aimed at the stag, but the stag vanished, clean out of sight. Off he went again on the following day, and once again the stag was enticing the young man, and so it went on for 3 or 4 days. His wife spoke to him. "Where is it you go every day, neither eating or drinking, only concerned for your forest? But don't go near the mill pond, just so that no trouble will befall you." "I never go that way, my dear. I only go hunting in the forest." Once again he set off, tracked the stag, and brought him down. He thought of skinning it, but in skinning it, he got covered in blood, so he decided to go to the river and wash himself. There he set down his cap and his satchel. But once he put his 2 hands into the water, 2 mighty arms rose out of the water, fastened themselves around his neck, and dragged him in and under. His good wife was waiting for him at home. She ran to the forest to the mill pond, and there she saw his cap and his satchel. "Dear God in heaven, what my father-in-law warned about has happened." Up and down the edge of the waters she raced. "Give me back my good husband, water fairy." But the water was silent. She ran and ran until tiredness overcame her, and she lay down and fell asleep. In her dream she saw, not far away, a shack in which there lived an old woman who knew many, many secrets. She awoke, and just as in her dream, off she went to the shack. She knocked at the door and spoke of her problem in floods of tears. There, my dear," said the old woman. "When the moon is full, off you go to the place and sit at the edge of the waters. I'll give you a brush, and with it you must brush your hair." So the young wife waited until the moon became full. She went to the edge of the waters, let loose her hair, and began to brush it. And then, all of a sudden, Her husband stuck his head out of the water, but he said not a word, and then he vanished again to the watery depths. She went home and told the old woman what had happened. The old woman said, "Tomorrow evening you must bring a spinning wheel with you, and there you must spin." And so she did. She brought a spinning wheel, sat there at the spot, and began to spin. And when she span, once again the water frothed, and her husband appeared up to his waist. But again they were not able to exchange a word between themselves. "Off you go, dear girl. This is the third night. On this flute you should play a sweet, sad tune. Then you'll see what happens." And so it was. The young wife sat there on the same spot and played. At first the water started to froth, and in she jumped and embraced her husband. But then such a storm blew up that her husband was carried off to one shore and the wife to the other. They were thrown so far apart that she stayed on one and he stayed on the other. Then the man took work as a swineherd and the woman as a cook. The swineherd brought the pigs out to feed every day, and the woman brought food at midday to her master in the meadows. When she brought the food to the master, she saw that there was a swineherd off in the distance. So she walked towards him, and they began to speak. And as they spoke, the young woman asked the man where he had come from, and the man began to tell her of how he had been born, and how the water fairy had carried him away, and how he'd been parted from his darling wife. And as he told all these things to his own wife, her eyes opened once again, and she saw that he was her husband. Then they embraced and kissed each other sweetly and went home. They had many, many children, and they all lived happily ever after. This is the end of my tale. Hungarian Folk Tales. Pepperpot Peter. Once upon a time, there lived a king who lived in doleful sorrow because he had a daughter who limped. His daughter wept and cried day and night because if someone came to court her, they up and left straight away. The king was afraid that his only daughter would spinster her life away, and so he sent the word across his kingdom that whoever could cure his daughter would live in wealth until the day he died. Now so many swarmed to the castle that the doorknob always had a hand on it, but the king's daughter still limped. Pepperpot Peter also went to try his luck. They called him Pepperpot Peter because he was really very little. So off went Peter and went on his way until he came upon a poor woman who was carrying a heavy load of wood. "Let me help you, old lady. I'll carry this," said Peter. And while the old woman was trying to thank him, he had already stacked the wood for her. "What brings you to this distant land?" asked the old woman just when Peter was bidding her farewell. "I'm off to cure the limping daughter of the king." "Well, fine it is that you met with me, because only I know what the cure is. But it's not easy to get hold of." "Well, tell me which way I have to go." "Listen carefully, son. On the summit of the glass mountain, there's a little lamb, and around its neck, there's a golden bell. If you can ring that bell 3 times under the girl's window, then you are sure to cure her. And how can I find my way there?" "Only with the magic horse of the king of the giants. And no one has ever been able to get it out of its stable." Pepperpot Peter thanked her for her directions, and off he went without stopping until he came to the castle of the king of the giants. Under the gate was a hole, and through he went, straight to the stables. He tried to untie the magic horse. The horse let out such a whinny that the king of the giants fell out of his chair, for lest I forget, the king was at his dinner. Well then, off he ran straight to the table. Peter, in his great fear, turned into a flea and hid in the manger. When the king of the giants left, Peter climbed out again to untie the tether of the magic horse. Again the horse let out a whinny, this time so loud that the king hit his head against the wall, and off he ran to the stables without pause for thought. Once again he saw not a soul, because Peter turned into a flea and hid in the manger. The king gave the horse a good whack. Why should it be whinnying when no one was hurting it? At his third try, Peter managed to untie the horse. In vain it whinnied. The king didn't go to the stable. When Peter got through the castle gate with the magic horse, it whinnied so loudly that the walls of the 3 bastions trembled. The king came out in a rage and saw that his horse had been stolen. He jumped on the back of a tomcat and off he went after Peter. Peter was very pleased with the horse. The moment he set his spurs to it, the horse flew to the glass mountain. There he saw the little lamb with the golden bell dancing in the silken meadow. He went up to the lamb, but when he tried to take the bell off the lamb's neck, an angry little devil popped out of the ground. "I've been waiting for you, you good-for-nothing," he told Peter, shook him fiercely and ordered him to make a barrel in the woods. When Peter had finished, the little devil went out and sat on the rim of the barrel and said, "Now I'm going to stuff you into the barrel, you thief." Peter saw that this was no joke and suddenly turned into a bee and stung the little so hard on the finger that it fell backwards into the barrel. Peter quickly put the lid onto the barrel, leaving a tiny hole so the little devil wouldn't suffocate. He took the bell off the lamb's neck, jumped onto the horse, and didn't stop until he got to the window of the limping daughter of the king. He rang the bell for the first time and saw that the bushes and trees started to dance. Then he rang the bell for the second time, and the court chamberlain and all the courtiers came out with the king himself, and everyone danced and sang. He rang the bell for the third time, and then the king's daughter opened the window. Pepperpot Peter asked her to dance with him, and she didn't limp, not even a step. So joyful were they all that no one wanted to stop the revelry. "Well, my son, you have cured my daughter. Marry her and make her your wife for life." With that, he took the crown off his head and gave it to Peter, and he was just about to try it on when the king of the giants arrived on the back of the tomcat. You can imagine the panic. The king of the giants opened his mouth wide and swallowed down the whole court in one gulp. He didn't even hiccup. He only spat out the trees and the bricks the way that someone else spits out cherry stones. Peter, at the last moment, had jumped aside and hidden in the trouser pocket of the king of the giants. There he was safe and sound. The king himself was so full that he could hardly breathe, so he sat down on the ground. Pepperpot Peter waited until he had fallen asleep. Then he climbed out of the pocket, called 1,000 spiders together, so that he couldn't move. Then Pepperpot Peter somersaulted across the belly of the giant, and it burst straight away, and the people of the court were saved. 99 tailors sewed up the stomach of the king of the giants. By the time they had finished, the giant had slept it off. But he didn't have such a good time at Peter's wedding feast, for all he could eat was 3 oxen. A month and a day after the wedding, Peter took possession of the kingdom under the name of Pepperpot Peter the First. And that's the end of my story. Hungarian Folk Tales. The Poor Man and the Dog. Once upon a time, there was a poor woman who lived together with her poor husband. They didn't have a thing in the world that they could call their own, except for a brood of children and a filthy little pig. Once they found themselves so utterly penniless that it well nigh drove them out of their wits. The woman said to the man, "Listen, my husband, let's slaughter the pig. You take the pig fat to the town and sell it, and I'll cook a fine meal for the children." So they slaughtered the pig, but its fat was as thick as my little finger. So the man wrapped the pig fat into a little bundle, tied it to the end of a stick with a piece of twine, and set out to the town to sell it. He walked over hill and dale until suddenly a dog sprang out of a ditch and started snapping at his heels. "Woof, woof, 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 woof. Hey, you mongrel, leave me be. Don't hold me up. I'm going to the city to sell this pig fat. I want to make a little money. Woof, 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 woof. What's that? What's that? You say you want to buy the pig fat? Well, I'll sell it to you, but will you pay for it? Woof, 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 woof. You'll pay for it in 3 weeks from now? That's a long time, but I myself am poor. I know what it is to be without money. Fine, it's yours, but 3 weeks from now, I'm coming back for the money. And if you don't pay, I'll beat you until you beg me for mercy." So the man took the bundle of pig fat from the stick. The dog grabbed it in his teeth, trotted back to the ditch, and started to chomp and chew at it with great delight. When the poor man arrived home, his wife was waiting for him at the gate. "Dear husband, did you bring home any money?" "Money? No, I have not brought home any money." "Blessed Lord, what have you done with the pig fat?" "The pig fat? I sold it." "Then tell me, to whom did you sell it? Who was the shameless wretch who didn't pay?" "I gave it to a dog." "Blessed Lord, how can you have been such a fool as to give the pig fat to a dog?" "He told me he would pay for it in 3 weeks from now." "Dear husband, tell me, how did you speak with the dog?" "Quite easily. I asked questions, he woofed." "Dear husband, you are a fool." And from then on, the woman teased and taunted her husband, calling him a fool and a half-wit. But the man really was a little thick in the head, and he paid her no mind. The 3 weeks soon passed, and the man took his stick in his hand and set off to get the money he was owed. He went over hill and dale, and when he reached the spot where he had first seen the dog, the little mongrel leapt out of the ditch. It wagged its tail and barked at the man. "Woof, woof! Woof, woof, woof! Woof, woof! So, little dog, here we are. I have come for the money. Woof, 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 woof. Enough of your woof woofing. Give me the money." But the dog only woofed some more. Woof, 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 woof. The man became angry, and he hit the dog with his stick so hard that the little dog yelped in pain, ran back into the ditch, and started to dig. And it dug, and it dug, and it dug, and lo and behold, a little barrel of money rolled out of the dirt. The man was overcome with joy. "Goodness me! Forgive me if you can, little dog, for having struck you with my stick. I never imagined you were so wealthy. I'll take half the money to pay for the fat and half as interest." So then he took the little barrel under his arm and set off, proudly swaggering home. Once inside, he dumped the countless coins on the table. The children rushed in and started spinning and rolling the little coins. The man and the woman began to discuss all the things they would buy. They were overjoyed. But alas, the man in his joy could not keep his silence. He walked the length and breadth of the village and cried out at every gate, "We're rich! We're rich! At last we're rich!" His wife snapped at him. "Foolish man, be quiet. Our relatives will hear that we have come into money. They will rush to our doorstep and beg us to give them some." But she cautioned him in vain, and the man continued to boast and brag. One day the woman said to her husband, "Dear husband, it's cold and rainy. Go stand by the stove under the chimney where you can warm yourself." The chimney in the poor man's house opened up to the sky, and when it rained, the water dripped down onto the coals. The woman went up to the attic with a bucket of water. There was still a bit of sausage left over from the pig. She threw it into the water and poured the whole bucket, sausage and all, down the chimney, onto her husband's head. When he felt the little pieces of meat falling on his head, the man ran out of the house. "Dear wife, did you see? It's raining sausage." "I see, dear husband, I see. And do you know why it's raining sausage?" "It's raining sausage so that we may remember the time we suddenly found ourselves rich. If someone asks you when we came into a hoard of gold coins, you tell them it was the day that sausage rained down from the skies. Do you understand?" "I do. Barely 3 days later, the judge arrived with 2 policemen. "Show us the gold coins. We all know you recently came into a hoard of gold coins." "Your Honour, gold coins? When did we ever have gold coins?" Her foolish husband answered, "Dear woman, have you forgotten? It was the day sausage rained down from the skies." "Ah, yes, Your Honour, my husband is not quite right in the head. For never has sausage rained down from the skies, and never did he or I come into a hoard of gold coins." The judge and the policeman laughed heartedly, for the world is indeed full of fools. The poor man and his wife enjoyed their new riches, and they all lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. A talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach. Once upon a time, there lived a king who had 3 beautiful daughters. He was leaving for market one day when he asked his daughters, "Tell me, what would you like me to bring you from the market?" The eldest replied, "Dear father, bring me a golden dress." The second daughter replied, "Bring me a silver dress." "And what shall I bring for you?" the king asked his youngest daughter. "Dear father, bring me a talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach." The king shook his head. "If such things are to be found in this world, I will bring them to you, daughter dear." The king went to the market, where he quickly found and purchased a golden dress for his eldest daughter, a silver dress for his middle daughter, but he simply could not find a talking vine, a smiling apple, or a jingling, tingling peach. The king was downcast. It saddened him that he was unable to fulfill his most beloved daughter's wish. While he was brooding, his coach gave a sudden jolt and got stuck so deep in the mud that the horses could not pull it free. The king was furious because his trusty horses could race more quickly than the stars across the night sky. He sent to the village for help, and when news spread that the king's coach was stuck in the mud, men, women, and even small children came to lend a hand. To their shame, no one could push the king's coach free. All of a sudden, a pig appeared. "Oink, Grant, oink, your highness, give me your youngest daughter's hand and I will free you, your horses, your coach, and everything." The king stood and stared in amazement, but whatever the king thought, he simply replied, "We will shake on it, a king's hand and a pig's trotter. If you free me, I will give you my youngest daughter's hand." The pig didn't wait, didn't hesitate. He wedged his snout under the wheels, gave a shove, and pushed the coach from the mud. The horses took off at a gallop, and the king was back in his castle in a flash. And when he got home, he gave his eldest daughter the golden dress and his middle daughter the silver dress. But with great sadness, he said to his youngest daughter, "My dear girl, my darling daughter, why didn't you ask for a dress too? For I failed to find a vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach." But hardly had he finished when he heard a gruff grunting outside. He looked out of the window and saw that the pig had even brought his wheelbarrow. "Oink, Grant, oink, I've come for your daughter. Let her come down and I'll carry her off in my wheelbarrow." "Stop there," thought the king. I'll send you a maiden." A peasant girl was quickly found, robed in the beautiful golden dress, and sent out to meet the pig. But the pig was no fool. He said to the king, "Oink, Grant, oink, this is not your daughter." The king began to regret that he had ever given his word to a filthy swine. And the princess? She sobbed and moaned so terribly that the whole palace shook. The king, shedding bitter tears of grief, told her, "My dear daughter, I have promised you to the pig, so you must go." Then the king had an idea. He dressed his youngest daughter in dirty rags and sent her out to meet the pig. The pig, when he saw the princess, was beside himself with joy. He grabbed the girl, placed her in the wheelbarrow, and carried her off, grunting and oinking all the way. "Oink, grunt, oink. Don't cry, princess. You'll be happy with me. We'll soon be home." But the daughter only really began to sob when the pig came to a stop in front of a large sty, took her inside and sat her down on dirty straw. "Oink, grunt, oink. This is my home," said the pig, and he offered her some corn. "Oink, grunt, oink. Have a bite to eat, princess." But the princess simply sobbed and moaned. She cried and cried until she eventually fell into a deep, deep slumber. The princess slept and slept, and she didn't wake until noon the next day. As the noon bell rang, she opened her eyes and, wonder of wonders, she was dazzled by a blinding light. She had lain down in a pigsty, and now, lo and behold, she awoke in a palace. A host of maids hurried to her bedside. They brought her sumptuous robes and dressed her beautifully. Then they took her into the neighbouring room, where a handsome youth sat at a table laden with food. He said to her, "Take a seat. Everything you see is yours. I too am yours, if you will have me." "Who are you? What are you?" the girl asked. "I will tell you in good time. Come now to the garden." He took her arm, and they went into the garden. In the garden, a fine vine leaned towards the maid, and the clusters of grapes spoke. "Pick us from the vine, princess." They walked on, and soon she espied an apple tree, the little red apples on its boughs smiling beautifully. "And as you see, we have smiling apples too," said the youth. They walked a little more. "What is jingling and tingling so sweetly?" the princess asked. "Jingling, tingling peaches, as you wished. Now will you stay and be my wife?" The princess wrapped the youth in her arms. "Yes, I will stay and be your loving wife for the rest of my life." But the youth then told her how he had once been a king, but a cruel witch had changed him into a lowly swine and put a curse on him. He would remain a pig until he found a maid who had wished for a talking vine, a smiling apple, and a jingling, tingling peach. They sent word out that very day, inviting every member of his kingdom to the wedding. Their fabulous feast was indeed a wondrous sight to see, and they both lived happily ever after. Hungarian Folk Tales. Fisherman John. By the banks of a mighty river stood a fisherman's hut, and in that hut a fisherman lived together with his wife, but alas, they had no children. One moonlit night, the old man went down to the river, and he cast his net. Suddenly he saw something approaching on the waters, and it shined like a star. He watched as it neared him. And what did it turn out to be? A small coffin. And in the coffin lay an infant child, fast asleep. He lifted the coffin from the waters, placed it in his boat, and took it home to his wife. "Look what I caught in the river." And lo, he showed her the beautiful golden-haired child. "We have no children of our own," he said. "We are old. We will raise him, and then we will have someone to care for us." The old woman agreed. Time passed and the child began to go to school. The school teacher had a scrawny little horse. He said to John, for that was the boy's name, "Little John, tell your father he could buy this horse." So John ran home full of excitement and told his father. "Father, my school teacher has a horse for sale. Let's buy it." "We don't need a horse, son. We have neither hay nor oats. How would we feed it?" The boy said, "It could graze in the woods by the banks of the river." So they bought the scrawny horse, and the horse grazed in the woods by the banks of the river. One day, the horse spoke. "Listen, John, at the edge of the village there is a small house. In it, a worn saddle. Ask the owner to sell it. If he won't sell it, steal it." The owner gave John the saddle, for he had no need of it. And little John took it home and put it on the horse's back. Then the horse said, "Go, John, to the edge of the village. There is an old bridle bit. Buy it, and if the owner will not sell it, steal it." But the owner would not sell the bit. So John stole it. Again the horse spoke, "John, go to the village. There is an officer there who has a rusty sword, and if he will not give it to you, steal it." The soldier gave John the sword and told him, "Polish it until it shines. Be a soldier." John returned home and again the horse spoke. "Master Fisherman John, tell your father to buy you new clothes." The old man said, "Son, I cannot buy you new clothes, for I have no money." But John insisted and told his father that he would pay for the clothes. So his father agreed and bought him new clothes. Again the horse spoke. "My dear John, polish the harness, the bit and the sword, then clean the saddle and put it on my back." He continued, "My dear Master John, you have a younger sister whom we shall bring back." John, however, insisted that he had no sister. The horse said, "Yes, you do, at the edge of the neighbouring country. She is locked away and only rarely sees the sunlight. Climb on my back and we shall set off." They went to the edge of the neighbouring country and found the house where the girl was locked away. There the horse spoke. "John, kick the door 3 times. If it doesn't open, strike it with your sword 3 times. If it still doesn't open, look around to see if you can see anything. And if you do see something, jump on my back." "I see an old woman," said John. At that, the horse took off at a gallop, racing along as fast as thought. When they reached the banks of the river, the old woman appeared behind them on a long stick carrying a broom in her hand. And when the horse jumped to the far bank of the river, the old woman struck the surface of the water with such force that the waters parted. She cried out, "Lucky for you that you got away!" Then the old woman went back. The horse said to John, "My dear Master Fisherman John, we will set off again tomorrow, but you must be very careful." The next day they set off again for the house at the edge of the neighbouring country. John kicked the door, then struck it so hard with the sword that it burst open. He grabbed the girl's arm, but he tore her blouse and was unable to pull her out. Again the old woman appeared on the stick with the broom in her hand. John said to his horse, "The old woman is coming!" And the horse raced homeward as fast as the winds of a storm. When he reached the river, he jumped to the far bank. The old woman lashed out at him with the broom and struck the horse's rump, but the horse was still able to leap to the far bank. The old woman cried out, "If you ever return, I will have all of your teeth." The next day the horse said to John, "Fisherman John, we won't go today, but tomorrow we shall. Today we must rest." Then he said, "Dear master, there is a tree in your father's garden with 3 apples on it. Pick them, put them in your pocket, and when we arrive at the house at the edge of the neighbouring country, throw one of them at the top of the door, one at the bottom of the door, and one at the middle of the door, but throw them so hard that you break the door down." So John did as he was told, and when they arrived at the house, he threw the apples at the top, the bottom, and the middle of the door, and the door broke down. The girl, Helen, stood in the doorway. John led her outside, and when they had left the house, John looked to see if he could see the old woman, and indeed, there she sat on her stick with her broom in her hand. John said to his horse, "Oh, the old woman is coming, on a stick, carrying a broom in her hand." So John and Helen quickly mounted the horse, and the old woman chased them. "Fisherman John, look behind us, because I feel that my rump is on fire." Johnny looked back and saw a cloud of dust far behind them. The horse flew onward. And when they reached the bank of the river, the old woman was still behind them, accompanied by 27 magic stallions. John's horse jumped to the far bank. The old woman and the 27 stallions tried to jump the river too, but they fell into its waters and drowned. And today they still lie somewhere beneath the waters of the river, if no one has fished them out. And so John rescued his sister Helen from captivity, and they both lived happily ever after.